All right.
And we are live. You can catch us on Rumble, Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll be right back with you, Howlers. We'll be right back. How's over Baz? I'm Jacob Casas.
And I'm Rico.
And this episode is called Grants. Got a little stuck there. But you know what? We were a little late coming in. So we had some issues with YouTube, but we got everything taken care of. Shout out to Diamond Studios. Thank you for that. But we have a very special guest today. I'm very excited about this episode. So I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Dr. Summer DeRuiter, and my business is DeRuiter R&D. And what I do is I write grants, anything from small grants for nonprofit organizations, all the way up to the largest grant I've written was for $540 million for a big DOE infrastructure project. And what makes DeRuiter R&D special is we also do business development through grant writing. So in a lot of cases when you hire a grant writer, if you don't win the grant, you end up with nothing. But at DeRuiter R&D, I want to make sure that you take away something that's useful for your business when you're done. So as we're developing a grant, I'm asking you questions that are really important in the business development process. Who is your team? What is your budget? What is your timeline? All of these things not only are necessary for writing a good grant, but they also help you write a good business plan or a good project plan. And it's putting those plans in place that often make the difference between a dream and reality. The nice thing about grant writing is you can get somebody else to pay for that dream.
Yeah, so that sounds very interesting. So I've always been very interested in getting grants, trying to get grants for businesses and different things that I've done. I find it so hard. I had no idea how to do that. So let's just say, before we get into that, though, I want to back up. Before we get into that, we've had a conversation before the show, and you're a very interesting person. I have a lot of respect for what you do and who you are. From the degrees you have, even the background of she's a martial artist as well. And for you guys that don't know, we had a MMA fighter in here earlier today. But I wanted to break it down. Can you give a little information of the degrees you have, what you do? She's a scientist. I mean, a bunch of different things that you have. Can you break that down a little bit?
Sure thing. Yeah, I've always loved the sciences. You know, ever since I was a little kid scrambling through the forests of Illinois, that's where I grew up. I'm originally a Midwestern girl from a small town, but I always wanted to know how things work. You know, when I saw the birds flying, I wanted to know how they did that. When I saw rainbows forming in the sky, why does that actually happen? And so it was just natural for me to be attracted to the sciences. And because I was really lucky. My grandpa, after World War II, he and several of his friends came back and they built this little area of cabins. They actually dammed up a creek and built cabins, and that's one of the places I really grew up, was hiking through those forests, picking mushrooms, picking flowers. And so I grew up in nature. So I had a real appreciation from nature, just from the amazing feelings I had just being out in it. And so when I went to my undergraduate, I went into biology. And since I was in Illinois, I studied the prairie. And I actually learned how to restore prairies. The amazing thing that a lot of people don't know is the prairie ecosystem used to be one of the biggest ecosystems in America. It went from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachian Mountains. But the problem for the prairie was it also grew 8 feet of really rich soil. And that's where we planted all of our crops. So now the prairie is 0.1% of what it used to be. So I studied the prairie in undergraduate, and then when I got into my master's program, actually I took some time off to work, and I worked with my dad in a wet milling plant in that processed corn, of course, in the middle of Illinois. Then I went for my master's degree, and I started studying this amazing thing called coevolution. And evolution is the study of biology and how living things came to be the way they are and how they might change in the future based on their genetics. But coevolution is about how two sets of living species pushing and pulling on each other can influence each other's path as well. So whether you're talking about predator-prey interactions like wolves and sheep, or host-virus interactions like we just went through, all of us in this planet, or what I studied was pollinator-plant interactions, how we get most of our fruits and vegetables. You have to have a flower, then the bee or the butterfly or the bat or the bird comes in. They get a snack, and then they transfer the pollen and produce the fruits. And so that's what I studied for my master's degree. But I really wanted to teach. I really wanted to teach at the university level because I wanted to pass on my love for nature to as many people as possible. And that's why I went all the way through the PhD, because I wanted to teach at a Research One university where I was really teaching people the stuff they really needed to go out there and change the world. And that did get derailed, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I got all the way through my PhD. During my PhD, I did 4-month field seasons where I would travel by myself all through the desert Southwest. I started in Miami. I did my PhD at University of Miami, and I'd start there and I'd drive all the way across Texas. My first field site was in Texas, then Arizona, New Mexico, then all the way up to Utah and Colorado. I put about 40,000 miles on my car every single year to do my field work.
Wow.
Got done.
So explain a little bit of the field work, just for the viewers, because we were talking a little bit about that, and I kind of want them to understand what you were doing in the field.
So when you're talking about coevolution, you're talking about one species changing another. And you might ask, well, how can one species change another? Well, if you look at all the colors of flowers that are out there, you have purple ones, blue ones, orange ones, white ones, and people have asked, scientists ask, well, why do we have these different colors of flowers? And one of the things you might notice is that hummingbirds are really attracted to red. So hummingbirds' eyes are a lot like ours, and they see red really vividly. And the thing about red is that it stands out really well against almost every background. But hummingbirds are really hungry. So one of the things, bug pollination was the first thing to pop up. So most flowers were small, white or yellow, but one of the benefits of having hummingbirds as pollinators is these guys travel a long distance. And one of the things you want when you're making seeds is you don't want to be inbred. So you don't want something that's just going to go between the plants in your population, because those are probably seeds you just dropped last year and they're related to you. So the great thing about hummingbirds is they travel long distances. And so I was really interested in what caused plants to become hummingbird pollinated. So in my master's degree, I looked along an elevation gradient, thinking that hummingbirds would maybe be able to go to the higher elevations, and bees would be at the lower elevations, because bees need heat. They're cold-blooded species. Hummingbirds are warm-blooded, so they can get to the top. So I thought there might be a difference in the floral structure or function, but there wasn't. The hummingbirds go all the way up and down the mountain, and they have the strongest power to push the flowers in their direction. So the flowers were same along the elevation gradient, and I figured that out in my master's degree. And then in the PhD, I actually found out that this flower switched sexes. So plants are even weirder than most animals.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, she was telling me about this earlier, and I'm like, I'm just listening, because I'm like, this stuff that you're explaining, I don't know anything about any of this.
So there's a male and female flower?
So almost all plants are actually hermaphrodite. They're male and female on the same individual. So the reason they do that is they get a 2-for-1 deal. So if you're male or female, you only get half your genes passed on for every kid you produce. But if you're male and female, you can get both of your sets of genes passed on to the next generation. So why is anything a separate sex? Well, it comes down to inbreeding. If you are a hermaphrodite, you can mate with yourself, and that's worse than brothers and sisters or cousins marrying. That's why they have that really nasty phrase when you tell someone to go, and it's actually bad for your genes too, not just bad for.
How do you even do that?
So, plants have male and female in the same flower. You know, the pollen, that's the male part, and then the part that sticks up in the center, that's called the stigma. That's the female part, and it's a long tube, and then the ovules, the eggs for the plant, are in the bottom, and that's usually what expands into the fruit later. So this plant I was studying, it's hermaphroditic in the center, but as I study more and more populations, I notice it goes from hermaphrodite to hermaphrodites and males to separate males and females. So it's almost like catching the evolution of separate sexes in action. So I studied each of these populations separately, and I actually did experiments where seeds were produced by bees alone, and then seeds were produced by hummingbirds and bees. And I found out the bees were highly inbreeding the seeds, and all the inbred seeds died. You know, there's a reason we have a taboo against inbreeding in humans. The closer related you are, the more possibility there is for any bad genes you're carrying along with you for diseases or cancer or anything like that. When you match the genes up, all of those things get expressed. All of those things get shown.
So like a birth defect.
Yeah. Yeah, you're much more likely to get birth defects if you're mating with closely related individuals. So in plants, they can mate with themselves. You can't get any more closely related than that. So what I proved with my dissertation, that it was actually a difference between the birds and the bees that was leading to the evolution of plant sex, because the hummingbirds were migrating through the center of the range. They could stay hermaphrodites because they were getting genes from somewhere else. They weren't mating with themselves, because the hummingbirds would visit every flower on every plant all the way from Mexico to Canada. These tiny little birds travel 2,000 miles in one season.
Wow.
You know, talk about frequent flyer miles.
Yeah.
They book. You know, they are in one population in 1 week, and then they're 100 miles away the next week, and then they're another 100 miles away the next week. So those plants along the Rocky Mountain Sierra Madre hummingbird migration corridor could remain hermaphroditic, but in the lower lying areas, the plants were left with bees, and bees would gather the pollen, the male part, climb up to the stigma, the female part, comb their pollen into their pollen baskets, then they would take the pollen away to their nest and feed their young with it. Yeah. So the bees were almost entirely inbreeding the plants, and so the sexes split, and that's how you get different sexes in plants, is something is pushing them to have those the sexes apart, because otherwise almost all plants go for the 2-for-1 deal.
Dang. That's crazy. I didn't even know that. She was telling me that. That's pretty crazy, huh?
So how does it work if it's just one, or is there just one? Are some plants just male and female, or all of them are, or what is it?
So 96% of all plant species, actually 94% of all plant species are hermaphroditic, some form of having male and female in the same individual. And only about 6% have split the sexes. Dang. And in most of those cases where the sexes have split in plants, there's something really strong driving them. You know, in the species I studied, it was almost 100% inbreeding depression. Almost all those self seeds died. So any hermaphrodite that was being self-pollinated, it wouldn't produce any young. So single-sex mutants pop up in plant populations all the time, but most of the time they get outcompeted because they're being outcompeted 2-for-1 for every seed that's put out there. But if all the self seeds die, then those single-sex mutants start doing better because they can reproduce and have viable offspring.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't even know any of this. This is all new topic to me.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you tune in for grants and you learn about plants.
That rhymed.
Yeah. So explain a little bit more of your degrees and things like that, because you have a lot of different degrees.
Yeah, so got
Biology.
the bachelor's in basically prairie restoration in biology, got the master's in life sciences where I started on this coevolutionary journey, and I got the PhD in coevolutionary biology, but because of what I went through in that PhD, I could not see myself going into a Research One university position. And it was really sad because when I went into that program, I was all set up for it. I even got a fellowship into that program. But by the end of that program, I didn't want to do it anymore.
What is a fellowship? Explain that.
So a fellowship was they basically paid me to go to college there, and it was something that I applied for. So you have scholarships, and scholarships always pay for a small portion of your college. A fellowship tries to pay for it all,
Oh wow.
and so even some fellowships even pay for room and board, books, and all your tuition.
So you got that, but you didn't go. What was
No,
it?
I got it and I went, but by the time I was graduating with my PhD, what had happened, when I started on my PhD, I had a brilliant young professor, and he was a really nice guy. And when I started with him, I thought I was set, because if you do go for a PhD, anybody that's listening out there, if you do decide to go for a PhD, you got to think of it like almost an apprenticeship or almost an indentured servant. You have to really know that professor is all there for you, that they're really concerned about your education and they really want to help you get where you want to go. Because if they're not there for you 100% for one reason or another, then you can be left out to dry. And that's kind of what happened to me. Not because of this young professor. He's an amazing guy named Stuart Schultz. When I started with him, he had a new NSF grant, a new baby, and he had just won a teaching award. So I'm like, I've hit the jackpot in professors here. This guy must be a golden boy. But he made the mistake of going into too much of the department politics. He told the other professors in the department what they were doing wrong before he had tenure. Now, the tenure system in academia protects you, and you can't lose your job after you get tenure. But if you go the wrong political way before you get tenure,
It's almost like the union type thing, backing you up.
yeah.
Okay.
So the tenure system, it's even stronger. It's like across the board in all universities. If you get tenure, not only can you almost not be fired, but you can take that tenure with you to any other university you go to. It's like a guaranteed job for life.
So what happened? They let him go? Is that what they
No,
fired him? Or
they told him he couldn't have tenure, and this was the university's policy. When you didn't get tenure at that university, they instantly fired you, and it was really unceremonious. So like he had to clean out his desk within a week. And so he went from working so hard and doing so many great things to
getting
just
an
being
award and everything.
out.
And
So he was there less than 10 years? Or
Yeah, usually they give you about 5 to 7 years to gain tenure.
That
in
just
a
shows
to see if they want
university.
you.
Yeah.
It just shows the power of politics.
Yeah.
You know, like it's
Especially
that's
university
messed
So
up.
he
politics.
he rubbed him the wrong
What
way before he
university
got
was
in.
this? If you
Yeah,
went?
it was University of Miami in Miami,
Oh, wow.
Florida, and the department has done much better in the time since. A woman took over as the chair of the department, and she took it in a much better direction. But it was just sad at this time because my professor wasn't the only one that didn't get tenure. There were 3 other young, energetic, and amazing professors that, no, you don't get tenure, get out.
Did they
And
have somebody already ready to back up for them already?
no, we were just left without professors, without those professors.
That's how
without
much they didn't care. They were just like, it doesn't matter what happens to you guys.
and that's the feeling that
That's
we
discouraging.
got as graduate students there too. That what we felt didn't matter because the graduate students were all for having all three of these professors make tenure. We had no problem with them. We were enjoying what they were teaching us. We were learning a lot from them. We were actually learning more from these young professors than we were from a lot of the people who had been there a long time.
Wow.
See, that's what happens when you know what I mean? You're not.
So, you know, that was a real kick in the teeth for me, because when you're a graduate student, you're looking at these people as examples of what your career is going to be like, and to basically see a firing squad of young professors go up and down and up and down and up and down right before you're getting the PhD and about to enter that field, it was really demoralizing. But it put me on the path to where I am now, and that was...
Explain that.
So, while I was at University of Miami, met an amazing guy who is now my husband. He's the DeRuyter, that is DeRuyter R&D. Although I started the company, but it's his name. But he was building things for the physics department. So my husband used to work in aerospace machining. He's built parts of Boeing and the fighter jets all around here, and he even has his name on Mars. He built enough parts of the Spirit and Opportunity rovers that they put his name on the microchip that went with them.
We're going to have to get him on too.
He's not very talkative.
He's not talkative?
He's the strong silent type. But yeah, I met him there, and he had this opportunity to work in green energy. And they actually asked him to design and build a whole new kind of wind turbine, and he did. And that was the next stage. So I joined him in that company, and I eventually became the research director for that company, and its name was California Energy and Power. And their whole idea was to design and build a new kind of wind turbine that could actually fit underneath the big ones, and that could be urban appropriate. You could put in the cities, you could put next to people, and instead of the propeller blades, it would spin vertically around the center post. And it spins slower, so it didn't kill birds, it didn't kill bats, it didn't make noise. It avoided a lot of the problems that the big wind turbines had, and it allowed you to put them in cities, which is something that's really important right now, that the whole infrastructure in California and the United States is going to change. We're going to need such massive amounts of green energy. We're going to need to put it in wherever we can, and that's what I'm doing in my business now. So, unfortunately, California Energy and Power was trying to build up during the global economic collapse of 2008. So that company folded, not through any problems of our own. I mean, we were in front of Lockheed Martin. We took our ideas to the Chevron Green Energy Group, and we had great feedback from all of those places. But when you're trying to build a green energy company from the ground up, start manufacturing and all these different things, it's a big leap, and it was an even bigger leap back then.
That's a lot of money in that. So you had to get grants for that. Is that what? Is that how you started this company?
That's not how this company started, but that's how my grant writing in green energy started. I actually wrote a collaborative grant with Caltech and another company that did a new type of plastic pultrusion that was going to do the blades and the other parts of the turbine in this really strong plastic that had been developed at Caltech. So we wrote this whole consortium grant, and it was the very first big grant that I had written for the DOE, and we came in just under the wire. They funded the top 5, and I think we came in 6th. So one of the Caltech scientists...
Wow, that's big.
Yeah, one of the Caltech scientists was able to get some money from the government, and he made a smaller... It was to make a whole research institution to study the way that you could get collective effort out of these wind turbines. Something that the flow scientists, the scientists that were studying, flow in air and wind, there at Caltech, they called it the schooling effect. Sometimes you can get more power out of a group of something by being a group, or more efficiency by being a group. And we were going to study that in wind turbines, because they've proven that in things like schools of fish. Why do fish school? They school because they can more efficiently swim and avoid predators in a school environment than they can by themselves. So
Like a pack of wolves, the howlers.
exactly, they travel in packs for multiple reasons, but also, as they channel their way through the forest, if you have one lead wolf to follow, then you don't have to figure it all out on your own as well. And so there was that company, and then I went back into academia. I'm actually still teaching at Chaffey College. But how I got into this grant writing business is I was asked to write the largest grant that's ever been given out by the Department of Energy. And these are called the H2 at Scale grants, and these were $2.5 billion each. And that has actually been awarded. They just announced that award, and California won one of those. Wow. And what it's for is to develop an entirely new infrastructure in green hydrogen. So producing hydrogen as a way to replace fossil fuels, but instead of producing it from fossil fuels, which is where we get most of our hydrogen gas now, you get it by splitting water using electricity from the sun and the wind.
Yeah, I've heard about that. That's very interesting. That's going to change everything, huh?
Absolutely, it really is.
When should all this take effect? What do you think?
So the big hydrogen grant is already started, and California has a plan. It's called the ARCHES plan. So if anybody wants to learn about what California is going to do with hydrogen, just go to I think it's arches.gov, or just type ARCHES in Google. And so what ARCHES is it's a consortium of all the businesses that want to participate in this new hydrogen infrastructure. So whether you're a transportation company or a pipe company or a green energy company or some form of gas provider, shipper, we're going to need all of it if we're going to shift our infrastructure from fossil fuels to hydrogen and from fossil fuels to electricity. There are just massive grant opportunities right now, and that's why I started my own business in grant writing.
So let me ask you a question then. So my business is I'm in the transportation business, but we're the mechanics for them. We work on all the big rigs, all the trucks that make the world go around, right? Fire trucks, big rigs that deliver everything to everywhere. So how would we be affected by that grant? Would we be able to be a part of that grant?
It's a real possibility, because it's other things that have to shift in the infrastructure in order for us to go as green as California wants to be. Is the trucks themselves have to change. And there's Nikola and several other companies, even the big truck companies, are thinking of switching over the whole engine to an electric engine or a hydrogen fuel cell engine. And that might be something that your company could get a grant for. If you're working on those systems now, they're going to need companies to work on the hydrogen and the
Well, it makes sense because we work
systems
on
too.
So California is the state right now where they have the Clean Air Act, where all the trucks have the DPF systems on there. So we already are working on pretty much all computers. To fix a lot of these things, we have our computer software to fix these things. So when they switch over, we're going to be any shop that's in California, we're going to be the closest to understand the system when it switches over, because everywhere else they don't do that. But California, we're already in the computer system. It's going to be more technology with computers fixing this than it will be engines, like working on the engines and gas and diesel and different things like that,
Yeah, but I have a feeling that there's going to be rounds and rounds of grants for retooling places just like yours to work on those, and then re-educating the workforce. That's another thing that this current administration, both in California and in the nation, is really working on, is workforce development.
Wow.
Because and it's part of the whole community benefits system, and that's another thing that I really want to touch on today while we're talking, is the entire federal government system has added something completely new to its grants, and that's a whole section called the Community Benefits Plan. And the Community Benefits Plan usually has 4 parts. And so you have how are you going to interact with your community? You have to actually, as a business,
Podcast.
well, they want you to go even further than that. They want you as a business to go and meet with the community, get feedback from the community. Instead of just going in and buying the site and scooting the community out of the way, you go in and you negotiate with the community. You ask the community you want to enter, where's the best place for us to build this facility? Where would it least disrupt your life? So that's the community organization section. Then there's a DEIA section. How are you going to use this grant money to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? You have to say that in the grants. Then you also have to say, how are you going to develop your workforce? How are you going to take this grant money and train people, especially people who haven't had access to training before, people who have been pushed out of the education system or who have dropped out of the education system? How are you going to get them back into the workforce?
You know what? I think this will be a good little test. So, because I can pretty much answer all those questions for this facility. So, actually, just for like purposes of what we're doing right now, can you break those down again and I answer those questions that you're just talking about right now? I would like to try that.
Sure. So, we're going to put together a community benefits plan for your business. One of the first things I want to ask you is, if you want to build a new facility, what community do you want to build that facility in?
The facility for this specific job would be this area, because we're already this area is the trucking capital of pretty much the United States, Fontana, because all of this is trucking right here. So it would be good to build on what we already have. Maybe even have a bigger facility, but there's shops everywhere, even empty shops, that we'd be able to build right here in Fontana.
Okay, and then the other thing they ask you in the community benefits is, really get to know your community. So, and the government has actually made it really easy to do this. They've got a lot of GIS maps. So GIS stands for Geographic Information System maps. So they would ask you things like, what are the number of disadvantaged people in your community? What is the poverty rate in your community?
I wouldn't know that, but I know Inland Empire has a lot of that. From San Bernardino to Fontana, Rialto, like they have the number of streets in Bloomington. So all around this area, if we can give these people jobs and we're already in the community, that would be a big deal.
Absolutely. And then they ask you about, how are you going to promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility? So you kind of take these in part, once you learn what your community is made up of, what is the race distribution, what's the economic distribution, how many people have below a high school education, how could you possibly get them back into the system?
So that's actually very interesting, because right now we're working with Chaffee School District, Chaffee High School, with interns, because AI is taking over a lot of jobs. So what's going on, and they're going to be taking over more jobs. But what we do, AI can't physically get in there and work on the equipment. So a lot of these people wanted to get in trades like plumbing, being a technician, mechanic, things like that. So the high schools are trying to bring people to us. And now we're even thinking of starting a class upstairs because our inspections and our DOTs and all the stuff that we do, in order for the truck to be compliant to be on the road, has to go through a series of inspections. Well, we can train these people, because there's no school right now at all that is able to train a person to do a DOT inspection or a PM service on a unit. It has to be in-house. Not even UTI, WildTech, any of these schools out there, they don't exist. So when they come in here, we do the internship with them.
You are the school.
We are the school. But we can actually, maybe get a grant for something like that.
It sounds it sounds like you've got all the pieces that they're looking for.
And what's crazy is our industry is so back in time, because we don't, it's like nobody pays attention to our industry. And it's so back in time, it's like people don't understand how much money there is in this field.
Well, absolutely. You've got to get stuff from one place to another. Until we invent a teleporter, you have to have transportation.
Exactly.
It's almost like it's so much everywhere we stop seeing it. And that's the problem with the human mind. When stuff is too much surrounding us, we almost don't see it anymore.
Exactly.
But yeah, the final part of the grant that we're putting together for your business would be how do you increase environmental justice? So we would look at, Fontana has had a history of pollution, and even,
Big time, yeah.
Yeah, we're in the LA basin. It used to be the smog capital of the world. One of the craziest stories I ever heard at Chaffee is some guy was retiring, and he said for the first 10 years he worked at Chaffee in Rancho Cucamonga, which is in the mountains, he didn't know the school was in the mountains because he could never see the mountains that they were in for the first 10 years when he was working there. So we have come a long way already.
That's great. I didn't think about that because of the whole California Clean Act. For
the Clean Air Act and all. It has had a big impact. It might be a pain to do it and enforce it and check it and inspect it, but we can see our mountains now.
But you know what though? For us, for trucking companies and owner operators, it's really bad for them. For us though, it's very lucrative for us. We make a lot of money with that. So before,
so you can tell the students that they can make
a lot of money. So
so
that's really what it comes down to because. Before that, truckers would run their trucks into the ground before they brought it in to get worked on. So mechanics weren't making that much money. You know what I mean? You have some scummy mechanic shop, and they would just make whatever it took when the truck broke down. But now they have to stay up to date on all their DOTs and for one little sensor that has soot on it, because the clean air, the soot that goes through there gets stuck. So a sensor that's like $800 sensor to even like $1,000 puts down the whole truck. The truck's just down, and then we got to diagnose it to figure out what sensor it is or what's going on with it. That it even is a sensor, and it costs a lot of money for that. So for us, it's great. The California Clean Act, as a business owner for this field, it's great for us. But for the businesses, obviously, it costs them a lot more money being able to do that.
And it will be really interesting to see. One of the things that a lot of people concentrate just on the near term. It's like, what are the problems right now? Let's focus on the problems. But what might California look like? How might our general public health be when nobody's putting poisons into the air, when every vehicle is a clean air vehicle? How much might asthma go down? How much might heart attacks and all these other public health things go down? So the final part of the grant, to wrap back to what we were saying, is how do you increase environmental justice? Because in a lot of cases, polluting companies, transportation is different. Transportation is everywhere. But in a lot of cases, polluting companies, they don't put that polluting power plant or polluting chemical plant in the rich neighborhood. They put it in the poorest neighborhood where the people don't have the power to say no, or haven't in the past had the power to say no. But this current cycle of grants, with these community benefits plans, it's 20% of your grant grade of whether or not you get the grant. It's 20% of it counts to how well you're interacting with the community. So these community benefits plans are a big part of whether you get the money or not.
So Fontana would be a good area then.
Absolutely. Businesses in Fontana could be at a much better level of qualifying because the community needs more help. If you were living in Bel Air, where they already have clean air and all that type of stuff.
And I guarantee you there's no other shops for mechanics anyways trying to do this. Because they don't think, I'm new to the game, just so you know. The people that I've been in this 9 years. I ran for altogether about 19 years, right, that I've been in the game. But these guys have owned their shops. They're way older people. They've been had their shops 20 to 40 years. And they do not think about this kind of stuff. They still have the mindset of the crummy shops, right? They still have that mindset. I don't have that mindset. So something like this could be a big deal for a shop to go in and ask for these kind of grants.
Oh, absolutely. It always pays to be at the head of the curve, to be thinking about the future before the future is smacking everybody in the face. Because once the future becomes obvious, then everybody's going to want to do it. But if you're at the forefront when it's a brand new idea, and that's why I really wanted to get this idea kind of out there, This administration is changing our whole infrastructure. And what that means is there are so many opportunities for people to start businesses, to build businesses, to expand businesses, or to take your business in a direction that you might never have thought before. That's the other thing about grants that a lot of people don't quite grasp. You know, a lot of people are saying, I want money just for this. But most grants, whether they're coming from a philanthropic organization or the state or the nation, they're aspirational. Most grants are going to ask you to do more than what you're doing right now. You know, even the DOE grants, which are for, you know, companies to continue to do, or maybe get into a slightly new field, but they're asking them to do more for their community through these community benefits plans. If you go to a philanthropic organization, they're going to ask you things like, how are you giving back to the less fortunate that are around you? How are you raising people up? That's the thing about grants. There are
Would
very...
that be like, I'm just wondering for answering that, would that be like giving them jobs because our facility's growing?
Yeah,
people
jobs,
are growing? Okay.
education.
Yeah. Because I would even think it'd be great to put a
Schools,
in the facility, like build a huge facility and have a school for these people to learn this stuff. Especially if AI is going to be taking over everything. This is a trade that people really need to get involved in.
And it's being called for in the industry. In this May in LA, they had something called the Climate Leadership Conference. And there were top executives and top government officials from all across the world that came to this. And the thing that I heard again and again and again is, who's going to do this work? We need infrastructure, we need batteries, we need renewables, but we need all the stuff that we already have. We need more pipes and plumbing. We need to take the lead pipes out of our drinking water systems and all this. There's so much. We need steel work and all of these things. Who's going to do it? Because for the longest time in this country, we said college is the way to go. And if you want to go into the trades, well, that's okay. But now we need to, when we really need to build stuff, when we need to do it, when we need to maintain it, when we need to change things, we need doers. You know, we've got thinkers. We've got a whole bunch of thinkers. Maybe, you know, I would never say we have too many thinkers because it's one of my pet peeves.
Yeah.
Don't ever tell me I think too much. But when you have enough people doing the thinking, somebody's got to do the doing.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to be on the ground, turning the wrench, making it happen.
And those people should be paid good for that.
And in a lot of cases they are. I mean, I make $100 an hour writing grants. Plumbers make at least $100 an hour turning pipe wrenches. You know, one's more of a thinking job, one's more of a doing job.
Actually, plumbers, because I stepped out on the plumbing company for a long time. And I had my best friend, I actually helped him with his plumbing company. Just for a basic job, they charge almost $300 an hour for a certain job. So plumbing company is very lucrative as well.
Yeah, and there are going to be a lot more jobs like that in the green energy future because it is going to have to be a little bit of a balance. These aren't going to be just manual labor jobs because you're going to have to understand the intricacies of the system. How, when you're connecting to a grid, what do you have to turn off to be safe? You know, how much amperage goes here, how much voltage goes there. So you're going to have a kind of a mix of education and ability to do as well.
Yeah.
So there are just so many opportunities. So those jobs are going to have to pay well because you're going to have to devote a good chunk of your time to get trained to do that thing.
So as a grant writer, this is just something I'm thinking of, because if you're getting these humongous grants, do you get like I don't know if this needs to be said or what, but do you get like a piece of this stuff? Like, do you get anything? Like, how do you, like, is it almost like a real estate? When they do a deal, they make money off the sale? Is that kind of how it works?
Well, on that $540 million grant, I really wish that was the case.
That's what I was thinking.
And
wow.
I could plan my beach house right now.
I don't think she'll be here right now.
But it is actually in the grant writer's code of ethics that you only charge up front. You charge like a professional service. You are a professional service. You charge like a professional service. You charge up front, and then you either win the grant or you don't win the grant. And so that also helps grant writers not fall into the trap of, well, if I only ask for things on the back end and then I don't win, then I've done a lot of work for nothing,
Yeah.
for no money.
So they don't want to do it. Then.
Now-
That makes sense too. Yeah.
I have worked for a few small startups that really didn't have the money to pay for my professional services, and in there I said that they could give me stock options, but then the stock options aren't worth anything until I help make the company worth something. So I consider that working for the
double
money
work.
all
It's
the
like
way
double work,
through.
yeah.
And with my business model of doing both grant writing and business development through grant writing, I see that as just part of a whole.
But see, that's very smart, I think, because a lot of the times, I mean, that company probably wouldn't even get close to that kind of money if you
Without
weren't
you.
writing the grants for it. Because I have literally been looking into getting grants for so long. I have studied it, researched it like crazy, trying to get grants for my business, and I just have not been able to.
Well, for the longest time, it's kind of been shrouded in mystery, and it was almost cryptic and in a different language. That is something I will say for both the California government and the federal government. They've just recently revamped these websites. California actually did their revamp of their grant website before DC did, but now the main grant website for all federal grants, which is just grants.gov. So if you want
Yeah,
to,
I've looked in.
if you've looked for your own grants, you go to grants.gov. They've revamped that and made it more user friendly. They've also made it so you can work on a team in what's called Workspace, and you can share grant information just with your team through there. So if you haven't looked at the grants.gov website in a while,
Yeah,
I
it's
would
been a
take
long time.
I would take a look at it again, because they're making it more user friendly, because this administration really does want more normal people to get a hold of federal funding. And then the the grant website for California is just grants.ca.gov.
And I feel like I'd be a little ahead of the curve on that, because I'm telling you, we are so looked over, our field. And even in fleet companies, like you'll have the mechanics that are in the shop, they have driver appreciation day and all this. They don't even look at us. There's no appreciation day for mechanics, nothing. These guys are the ones that keep these trucks rolling.
Absolutely. And you will be the ones that will keep them rolling when they're hydrogen fuel cells and when they're electric trucks. But, you know, I'm already seeing, they're already talking about federal grants for tooling up the the second stage. So there are federal grants that are already out there for building EV truck manufacturing and hydrogen fuel cell I can't remember the acronym, but the hydrogen
HFC?
fuel cell
HFC?
trucks. So there are grants for that manufacturing, and I have heard of grants coming for the education of the workforce to be able to work on them, for the building of the facilities where they can be worked on, because it's just the next logical step.
Yeah.
You can't send 1 million trucks out there and have nobody to work on them when they break down. You know, you hope that they don't break down for a while, and maybe the companies themselves will have a warranty and take care of them for the first year or so. But if you want this to be maintained over time, you're going to have to send out those next levels of grants for the people who are going to take care of these machines that you want us to transition to.
Wow. We're looking at some stock options then, aren't we?
There we go.
So with the virus happening, has it made things easier or harder for as far as getting grants or anything like that?
Well, there were grants that were sent out
Right.
during that, and that's one thing that people should know is if you maintained employees during the pandemic, there are still grants available that you can get.
And we did. We worked the whole time.
Yeah, so there's
I've never gotten grants for that. Yeah.
so we can talk about that, and it's actually, I think, a tax rebate. So, you know, we talk about grants, and grants are the free money. But the government is also spinning out prizes, and prizes are actually even more free. And when I say free, when you write a grant and you get the money, you have to do quite a bit of grant management. The DOE or the state is going to come every year or so, and they're going to do an audit when you have that grant, and they're going to make you prove how you spent the money, and you have to have receipts and all that. You have to even have like your own grant accountant to track the money.
Oh wow. Uh-huh.
So grants are free, but not free, because you have to invest once you get the money in taking care of the money and tracking the money.
And doing what you said you're going to do.
Yeah, and making sure that you did what you said you're going to do. But they now have DOE prizes where if you win that prize, they hand you the check and then you can go do whatever you want with it. Wow. There's
those still available right now?
Yeah, they're called the American-made prize competitions, and they have them in all these fields. There's an American-made solar competition. They have American-made prizes for HBCUs, getting HBCUs into green energy, and there's about 20 American-made competitions at any time, and I've actually entered companies in a couple of those, and the main thing we got back is in those they really want you to show the community benefits. And we were a new team and we hadn't had time to introduce ourselves to the community that we were interested in doing the project in. But I have proof that the federal government, whether it's prizes or grants, they really do want you to show that you've done the due diligence, that you've gone to the community, that you've talked with them, and that it's a collaborative effort to build whatever you want to build with that prize or with that grant in that community. So it's no more just, I've got money, get out of my way. If you want to have government money, then you have to work with the community where you're going to install these new facilities.
And I think that's good. I see that as being it's gonna be work, but I see that being a good thing,
Well, they're setting it up to be a win-win, because how many projects have tried to force their way into the community and then the community rebels and pickets and are you really going to get the best workers when the community doesn't like you? Are you, is your project going to go forward smoothly if you're bound up in litigation? Yeah. So the community benefits has a benefit for the company as well, because the company gets to work out all these things that might cause problems ahead of time. And there's an environmental component as well. Do you have all your permits? Are you going to help clean up the community you're going into, or at least not make anything worse? And have you proven that to the community? Because sometimes a business might go into the community and the community might rebel against it just because the community doesn't know about it. Back in my home state of Illinois, I talked about that lake that my grandparents built. On the way out to the lake, they're putting a carbon capture and storage underground facility in there, and there are all these picket signs up saying no to that facility. But this is CO2. It's the same stuff we drink in our Pepsi every day, and people are acting like it's toxic. But I've actually worked on carbon capture and storage grants. The level of safety you have to go to, and the number of geologists you have to hire, and engineers, and all these other things you have to do, that is about as safe as it can get by the time you actually get a project approved for carbon capture and storage. But I have a feeling that this carbon capture and storage system went in there without having any interaction with the community. So the community said, "Oh, these people are just coming in here and they're going to put something in here that we don't know about." And there's the previous problems with fracking. People putting breaking up and putting stuff into the groundwater trying to get natural gas out. And there has actually been bad environmental things happen when fracking has been done the wrong way. But that's the association that these people have in their mind. So they're like, we're not going to let you come drill into our land and put something in there that we don't understand. So this is the company's benefit in community benefits. If you get together and you have meetings with the community and you show them all the levels of safety you are putting in, and then you talk about jobs, then you talk about, hey, if you actually want the crops to grow, if you want this corn to grow on this land, we can't get much more than 1.5 degrees above where we're at now, because the corn is already stressed from the amount of extra heat that's in our atmosphere right now. So that's the company side of community benefits, is you work out all the problems beforehand so you don't have something just jam up the works when you've already started construction.
Man, I can't believe we're almost out of
Couple
time.
of questions, bro.
Yeah.
How do we enter the competition to win the prizes?
Yeah, how would you do that?
So you can just Google American-made competition on the DOE, and there's a whole website, and it's a very user-friendly website. And you can see what competitions there are. And each one of these competitions is for a specific thing. Like the one I entered was for community solar development. And this is another great idea that's out there. A lot of times people don't have their own roof. They're living in apartments or housing developments or something like that where they don't own the roof. So they can't put up solar, so they can't get lower electricity prices. Well, community solar puts solar out in a field somewhere, and you just become part of a power purchase agreement. You get money off on your bill, and you never have to pay for the solar installation itself. You just become part of a community solar development, and you can get the benefits of solar without having to have a roof to put it on. Wow. So that's another push that's coming from the DOE, is developing more community solar developers. And I actually took a class, and hopefully my certification for being a community solar developer is going to come through, because I took a class from the DOE through the University of New Hampshire, an amazing class on all these different things that you need to be able to do to make sure that when you set up one of these community solar developments, that people from disadvantaged communities can cut their bill at least by 25%. That's what this push is for cutting the electricity bills at least 25% in low-income communities, because there's a severe economic disadvantage. People with low incomes are paying a higher proportion of their income for electricity, and electricity prices in California are already crazy high.
Yeah.
So how do you get around that? If you don't have your own roof, if you can't afford a big chunk of money for solar, well, you can actually get a co-op or something else together and do a community solar development. And the other thing people need to also be aware of is there are community resilience centers that California is pushing. And this is to set up not just solar, but solar and battery in a community facility like a church or a school. Mm-hmm. So that if we have a big earthquake or fire or flood, we've had all of them lately. Let's just throw all of the apocalyptic things at California at once. So California needs resilience centers. So California is sending out grants to create resilience centers. And I'm actually working with a church right now in Montebello to do one of these community resilience centers on their church and school. They've got a church and an elementary school. They need to fix up the infrastructure of the whole church. We can do that, get it nice and safe and stable, then put solar energy and a electric microgrid and storage on it. So if all the other electricity in the community goes down, their power will stay on, so the elderly and the young and people who need power, like have ventilators and stuff, they can go there and have a source of power when everybody else has lost their power.
I got one more question too. I know we're almost out of time. You have a question too? Okay. So
you mentioned you charge $100 an hour to write a grant. Mm-hmm. How many hours does it usually take?
That's one that I have to unfortunately give one of those wiggle room answers on. It really depends. I've had a grant take an hour. I wrote a small business grant. The person I was working with put a lot of effort, her own effort into it. So it took me about an hour to review it, make sure it fit all the things, and then we just submitted it. This $540 million grant that I worked on, I was actually one consultant working for another consultancy that was working with two other consultancies hired by one large corporate company. And all of us, probably around 20 people, worked for 2 months straight on that one. So
that was good money.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so the total paycheck from that company was probably sizable, and I was happy with mine as well. But
for sure.
Yeah, grants take take different amounts of effort. So the funny story is I started out saying I started my business with this $2.5 billion grant. And the person who asked me to write that, it wasn't the state of California. We never wrote that big grant because the state of California was who we were going to ask for the matching funds. That's the other thing you need to understand about grants. Some grants ask your company to put in a sizable chunk of money to get the money. Now, the prizes often don't. So if you're a company without much money, you might want to look at the prizes first, get yourself on the radar, maybe get an investor then to put in matching funds for a bigger grant. And that's a process I help companies work through. If you've never done a grant before, let's start small, let's start local. There are a lot of local grants. Then you go to county grants. Then you go to state, then you go to federal. I would really never recommend that a company that's just starting out go straight to a multi-million-dollar federal grant because you're probably not going to get it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. I mean, this is a very interesting topic. I feel like we haven't even scratched the surface either yet. I do want to ask one question then before we end because I wanted to ask a lot of entrepreneurship questions, but we're going to have to bring you back on. I see you coming on like a lot more times.
I appreciate that.
Because I would love to have you back on. But I do want to ask you, because this is a question I like to ask a lot of entrepreneurs. What is leadership to you? When you think of a leader, what would you say a leader is?
Well, this is something I've been thinking a lot about because one of the grants that's closest to my heart is one that I've been developing ever since the beginning of this, and it's to create a whole solar community to build low-income housing with solar, with carports, with low-cost EV cars. I want to build a full-circle, functional human community and build it in a way that makes people focus on getting back to what I think makes a fully functional and natural human being. And that's realizing that we all need each other. This idea that America has pushed for a long time of the rugged individual, everybody goes off by themselves, pulls himself up by your bootstraps, don't ask anybody for help. That just doesn't work. What humans really need is a core of the closest people to you, husband, wife, closest friend, then extended friends, then your close community, then the further community, and there needs to be connections across all of this. So what a leader is to me is someone who builds these connections, who thinks of people not as tools, but as mutual support, who sees everybody as an unlimited resource for themselves and for each other. A true leader creates connection because that's how humans work. We are a social species. And if we try to do it entirely on our own, and if we have leaders that try to pull us apart, that's an anti-leader. That is the antithesis of a leader. Anybody who tries to tear people down or tear people apart, that is, if there was such a word as an anti-leader, that's what it is. A true leader builds connection, builds community, and makes it so it's easy for people to cooperate and collaborate. Because that's the reason that we've spread across the planet. Otherwise, we would have all been tiger food a long time ago. Because we're soft and we're pink and we have no teeth and no claws. The reason we have conquered the world is there were leaders that recognized that we are more powerful together.
Yeah. I completely believe that. I mean, hunters and gatherers, I mean, they had to have a community in order to survive, and they're trying to pull all that apart now.
And that's what we existed in. If you're wondering why we're so sad and so anxious these days,
And
is
mental
because
health and all that.
Yeah, because what we're built for is we're built for community. We need those layers and rings of protection to really feel secure, to feel solid, to feel safe.
A woman howler right here, guys. I'm telling you, like we were talking earlier, and I love this.
That's what we have to build, and I'm hoping that the leaders of the future will do that. Leaders never tear people apart. They never tear people down. They bring them together and they build them up.
And see, and that's what we've been talking about here on the House Over Bass show It's all these different entrepreneurs you bring in different fields, from fighters to different entrepreneurs, different business owners in completely different fields, is trying to put everybody together and figuring out how they can help each other collectively. And I see in other networking and networking groups, they do that, but I feel like they only do it to a certain amount.
Right there.
Not because when you go there, you actually look, how can they help me? That's usually how and that's how I went too. How can this person help me, right? But when you go there and if you have a set system where like we were talking about the Howler Network, you have a set system where you're like, no, I don't want you to go in there. You already have your business. You already have what you're trying to do. You need to go in there, and whoever they partner you up with, or whoever that maybe if they partner you up with somebody, or if they have a whole group and there's different people in the group, you got to figure out, okay, now if I'm partnered with this person, how can I help this person? Right. Your job is to figure out how you can look at that person and their business, evaluate it, and help them. And it's the other person's job to do that.
Right.
If you push that, I think, towards them, I think there'll be a whole nother way. Like, because even with the podcast, like, since I've been here and I had to listen to people's stories and them talk and different things, I'm like, how can I help bring that out of them? So we can talk on the podcast and people can hear their story. And I feel like that's the way to do things, because you got to bring that out of them, just like you got to help their community. I mean, look at that as like, I mean, we had other people on here. I don't know if you remember. No, you weren't here for him, but he was even talking about how you can even put funds in some type of network where it almost creates like a bank for that, for a whole network.
Oh, yeah. You can do endowments.
Yes.
You know, that's the kind of idea of an endowment. If people want to join together for a common cause, you know, you pool your money, you create an endowment, and then you fund off of the interest of that endowment. That's how a lot of universities fund their massive programs, is you make an endowment, and then you figure out how much you can peel off of that. So and the start of an endowment can be a grant, so we can talk about that.
Yeah, we can definitely talk about this stuff. So we got to have you. I appreciate you coming on. Like I was really happy with this episode.
Me too. I learned a lot, for sure.
And like I was explaining, we want to have a panel of a lot of entrepreneurs that we really liked coming on, and I've definitely already. This is not even something I've talked about with other people, but I'm definitely going to have you on that panel.
Well, I would love to be a part of it, because this is what I'm most passionate about. And one last thing I want to leave with your listeners is, like so many people. Right here.
Go ahead. Explain that to them. I want you to talk to them real quick. Go ahead.
So, like so many people, the pandemic really got me down to basically one of the lowest levels I've ever been at in my life. But as soon as I started thinking about what I could give back, and as soon as I started thinking of, you know, what do I really have to give? You know, I had the teaching aspect of it, but it's like also what's really needed now. And I saw all these grants coming out, and I saw the way they were angling them to help communities. It's like, as soon as I grasped onto that idea, and as soon as I stopped focusing on why I was so upset, and I started focusing on how can I help, how can I give back, ever since that point, when I started my business, I have been so happy. So a lot of people think when you're cooperating and collaborating, you're going to give something away of yourself, or somebody's going to take too much. But giving always makes you feel better than taking, almost always. So think about how you can give back and join in this powerful transformation that's going on in America, because we can make what we have last for our children and our grandchildren, and we can make it so much of a brighter, happier, and healthier world. So let's do it together.
For sure.
And I used to think the same thing before, because I used to think the same thing. I didn't want to give too much away. You know, I didn't want people to know my secrets and things like that. But at the end of the day, too, a lot of those times people aren't going to do it anyways. So you don't have to really worry about that. But it is, if you have the right people around you and you're building your pack, your pack of howlers, you can build off of that. You can build each other and just grow with each other.
Synergize.
And even when you look at big corporations, there's a whole board of directors that run businesses. Huge. It doesn't take one person. So we're the smaller companies, but eventually we have. If you build up, if you want to be like those, you got to build up with people, just different. But I appreciate you coming on, Dr. Summers. I really appreciate you. We're going to have you on the panel for sure.
That would be great.
And so, yeah, the Woman Howler right here. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Shed the Sheep and House Over Baz. I'm Jacob Casas.
And I'm Rico.
And we're out.